Guys, today I'm not in a good mood. Genshin Impact put out a new mode, the Imaginarium Theater, and after playing it, I'm quite disappointed in it. It's a mode that tries to do something new, but it tries that in such a lazy and uninspired way that it makes me dissatisfied both as a player and as a content creator. So in this video I'll go over what's wrong with it to me and how I would improve it. First of all, I know that they put out an announcement where they acknowledge it's in a not so good state and they will try to fix it in the future, but those words are not enough to me. And it's not enough to me because they really had a lot of time. Like, they had a lot of time to gather feedback from players that liked the combat but wanted something more in terms of endgame for it. They had almost 4 years to listen to us and to produce something that was great and enjoyable, but they failed. They really had so much time to get it, but they haven't. And now we're back to hoping they will listen to us and make the Imaginarium Theater good, but now I won't believe it until I see it. And this is coming from someone that just a few weeks ago was legitimately optimistic about the mode, because I believe the base concept can work, is good, but not in the way they developed it. So, as a first thing, let me clarify that my problem with the mode is not that it forces you to use a lot of characters. I know that quite a few people complained about it because now you have to prepare a lot more characters and it can be a struggle, especially for new players, but I don't mind it because it's an endgame mode, so it's supposed to be challenging in some way. But still, I get the argument because grinding is probably the most annoying aspect of Genshin Impact, and to clear this mode you have to level up a lot of characters, level up a lot of usable artifacts, and I get how it can be off-putting for a lot of players. Specifically, you need to select 18 characters to start off, these characters need to be of a certain minimum level, and for each battle you have to bring 4 characters, so it's a mode that offers no leeway at all in this sense. I imagine that the main feedback they picked to make this mode is the damn, Genshin Impact gives us so many characters to build but no proper way to use them in battle, and so as a response to this they made the theater. And this can work as a challenge, but it can't be the only one. To expand on this, at the center of the battle content of the mode we have 8 stages for the hardest difficulty. Each of these stages is essentially a slightly modified version of what we already have in the Abyss. The lineups of opponents are similarly basic, the stage has the same circular shape, and it even has a time limit for some rewards. The only tangible difference is that there are some extra challenges to get additional rewards, but they're pretty basic in structure. They added this extra shit, like do 3 backflips before killing a villager and get a candy, and thought it was enough to make it different to the Abyss, but it isn't. And this repetitiveness bothers me because it could be so much more. Like, personally, the thing that bothers me the most is that Genshin Impact is an open-world game, so a game where you should have unparalleled freedom of mobility compared to the genres, and this is true for the overworld, but in the endgame it becomes so restricted, honestly. Think about it, why does such a game, an open-world game, have no complexity whatsoever when it comes to stage design? Like, why? It pains me, because this game goes the extra mile to give characters super speed abilities, flying abilities, rolling abilities, and then it puts all of the opponents in this circle, which is just the death of imagination, honestly. I would like it if the stages were more articulate, like different shapes, bigger, some obstacles maybe, something like that. In a way, the current design is more fitting for a pure action game, where you have limited mobility and so you can't do much, but in Genshin we have jumping, climbing, and much more, but all of that becomes useless when it comes to the endgame, and I don't like that. Moving on, the interesting feature about the mode is that it restricts you in terms of which characters you can use. In fact, most of the characters you selected at the start will only be obtainable randomly throughout the mode, and each of them can only be used 2 times as a baseline. As a result, it's likely that you will be forced to use quite unusual teams for some stages. Now, in my opinion, this is both good and bad. The good thing about it, at least theoretically speaking, is that it forces you to think out of the box, because you have to make something out of nothing, and so you have to make teams that might not be optimal but have to work anyway. On the flip side, these compositions made on the fly can very easily end up feeling clunky and not very fun to play, and the reason is quite simple actually. And that is that the Genshin Impact combat system is very focused on having teams that work from a synergy standpoint, so cooldowns, energy productions, elemental reactions, abilities, and so on. If you can't take advantage of these aspects, you probably won't have a lot of fun, because the other parts of the Genshin combat system aren't as fleshed out. Like, sure, characters can have cool combos and animations as well, but those alone are not enough to make them fun to me. And that's because characters in Genshin often have weaknesses in terms of abilities, energy requirements, cooldowns that need to be hidden by the team. A perfect example that came out recently is Chlorand. Chlorand has a very specific flaw, and that is that her uptime is of just 7.5 seconds, and her cooldowns are of 16 seconds. Compared to their main DPS, her uptime is quite uncharacteristically low, and so she needs a very specific team that can play around their cooldowns more than others. And there are plenty of other examples as well, like Huta won't feel very good outside of vape teams because of how her kit is designed, or Child barely even feels like a character without a shell link. And pay attention that I'm not making a meta argument here, like I'm not saying play those characters in their best teams or fuck off, like I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying that without the team synergy aspect, the Genshin combat system takes a big hit. Recently, I made this tweet that got quite popular, quite infamous I could say, and there I essentially said that the Genshin combat system isn't necessarily worse than the Wuthering Waves combat system, it just focuses on something different than skill expression. That something are the team synergies which feel fulfilling because they make the characters' kits flourish, they make them work, they make the characters better. Not just in terms of power, they make the characters feel better, feel smoother, feel right, just right. If you take this away from the Genshin combat system, then it gets much closer to what the haters think it is, so an experience where you're just pressing random buttons and the enemies die anyway. And funnily enough, that's exactly what happens in the Theater, because to counterbalance the fact that they're giving you serious restrictions in terms of team building, the enemies are much weaker than in the Abyss. While this might seem fair in terms of difficulty balancing, to me it's not a really entertaining experience. Honestly, however, the mode is even too easy. Like, even if you use only the trial characters for the main bosses, you won't have any issues clearing them. Like, it's too easy at the moment, but I won't talk about it as a flaw, because it's the easiest thing they can fix. Like, they can scale the difficulty of the opponents up, and I'm sure they will actually. Now, back to the theme aspect, they introduced a way to make it more bearable, and that is the Wanderer's Boons. They're essentially buffs that you can buy through the mode currency, and they will make your characters considerably stronger. In a perfect world, you will be able to build entire new playstyles through them, just like it happens for the simulated universe in Honkai Star Rail, for example. In Star Rail, you can make complete archetypes through those buffs, and that's what makes the simulated universe a unique combat experience compared to the rest of the game. If this was what the Theater was about, I would be happy about the mode, but unfortunately it's not what it is. The first problem is that the buffs are pretty basic, like get a damage bonus if you use the elemental skill, get a damage bonus if you swirl the opponents get hit if you get healed. They will make your character stronger, but they won't replace the fun that comes from having perfect team synergies. Second, since you have to use so many characters, you probably won't be able to build an archetype that works for all of them. Like, say you pick the Swirl boon to buff your Wanderer, that won't benefit your Arlecchino, for example. I guess you could say, just pick 18 characters that all fit the same playstyle, man. Yeah, sure, that's easy, sure. Third, the mode is just not long enough for them to make a real impact. There are just 8 stages in total for the hardest difficulty, and throughout your run you should be able to get around 6 boons or slightly more, which just aren't enough to massively buff your characters. Unironically, the Abyss blessings feel more impactful for the Abyss than the boons are for the Theater. So, it's a mode that tries to do a lot of different things, but really does none well. The first run is kinda cool, especially because you're getting the Primo Gems, actually mostly for that. The presentation is great because the stages look at least aesthetically nice, and the characters all have voice lines in the saloon, so they definitely work on the presentation, but it's worrisome that the presentation is almost better than the combat part. And something that jumps out for me specifically is that I wouldn't play it again, like it has no replayability value. In contrast, while people like to shade on the Abyss because it's so basic, I like to play it over and over again personally, just to try different teams against a good opposition. And that's entirely because the combat system is good enough to me that even though the mode itself is pretty basic without a doubt, I can repeat it a lot of times and still have fun every single time. Meanwhile, not only the Theater doesn't elevate the combat, it kind of diminishes it in my opinion, so they really have to work on it. As for my suggestions, 1. Increase maximum number of uses for each character, like to 3 or 4 at least, then 2. Allow players to get more characters to start off, so they can plan ahead more efficiently. 3. Make the boons stronger and more unique compared to the rest of the gameplay, so they can be more fun. And 4. Add more stages to the mode overall, so you can collect more boons throughout your runs and build a whole archetype that way. What I fear, however, is that they will just increase the difficulty and call it a day. I think that's what will happen actually. And so, these were my thoughts regarding the new mode. If you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe and also go check the MLE guide I made a few days ago. Bye bye!